You are listening to Ideas and Leaders podcast. I'm Elena Paventa, Executive Communication Coach and TEDx organizer. With each episode, I'll share with you communication tips and ideas from top business leaders to help you excel in your career. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next episode of Ideas and Leaders podcast. Today, I have a great guest and my friend from Toastmasters, Florian Bay. Florian is an expert in leadership and public speaking, and he also runs his own company, Speak to Lead, connected with this. Hi, Florian.
Hello, Elena.
It's really great to have you here on the podcast and talk to you.
It's great to be with you as well.
So, Florian, you're now the expert in communication and leadership, and you're doing trainings on this. But as I know, you were not always like this. So you had your own insecurities, you were quite shy, as you say yourself. So what did you do to achieve this place where you are right now?
Very good question. I've always been interested in leading, in leadership, in historical leadership figures, and in the concept of basically taking a group of people and organizations somewhere. But my own leadership experience was very limited until university, where I started to kind of get more involved, but really couldn't get to a leadership position because I was shy. I had some insecurities. I was nervous. And after a series of events at university, I realized, I got to change. I got to really get a grip on some of these things. And one day I just went on Amazon and got some books about communication. One of them was called How to Speak to Anyone. And another one was like a mini book of body language to kind of learn what type of body language I could be using, try and read people a little bit more. And this is how my journey into self-development started. I learned about Toastmasters thanks to some of these books, and eventually joined a number of years afterwards because there wasn't a club next to Bath where I lived at university. And on this journey, I've been observing a lot, reading a lot, and practicing and experimenting with public speaking, communication, and of course, leadership position in Toastmasters International mainly.
So let's clarify for our listeners, what is Toastmasters? This is our hobby and we do it a lot, so we know it very well, but not everyone knows. So what is Toastmasters International organization and what it can give to people?
So Toastmasters International is the world's largest organization dedicated to public speaking and leadership training in a safe environment. It works with a series of local groups that people join. They can practice public speaking, they receive feedback, they can get leadership position and can receive some feedback in situation as well. And it's a safe environment. We all support each other, and there are levels where you could become a district director like Elena at the moment and myself last year, where you cover a country or part of a country and potentially have a couple of thousand people to look after. So quite a lot of responsibilities at an early stage.
Yes, indeed. It is a great place to practice actually communication, to practice leadership if you need it for your career. And I think that everyone needs it. So, and based on your experience, you were a district director, you were leading a very big group of people. So what is your approach to leadership? What do you think is the best way to lead a group of people?
I mean, I've got a number of things that I would put as my own twist and approach to leadership. One of the big principles I believe in is leading by example and leading from the front. I mean, there's this kind of image of the metaphorical image of a leader, like there's a battlefield and there's somebody atop the horses and it's like, let's go and slash them out, and he leads the army to victory. And it's kind of this image of the leaders, at least from the front. Now, of course, in real life, we don't sit atop a horse and start slashing away. But the image is a very powerful one in my view. And leading from the front for me is something that does open your eyes to a lot of things, because you are out there on the field and you see the challenges that the people you're leading are facing on a day-to-day basis, and you're much more able to relate to them and to understand what they might be struggling with, rather than by simply communicating with them or speaking with them, because instead of getting an image in your head, you see and you feel for yourself what the real situation on the ground really is. Something that's coupled to that as well is, as Ellen knows, I am a very big believer in the power of data and analysis, and to use data and number crunching for decision making. And you can crunch a lot of numbers, you could be the best analyst in the world, but ultimately numbers, they always give one side of the story, a very limited part of a story. And quite often, by going out there, by meeting the people, in the case of Toastmasters, by attending event or even by visiting Toastmasters group directly, you're actually able to translate numbers that might sometimes be a little bit abstract into a real life situation with people, feelings, and emotion. Sometimes the numbers match the expectation, match the expectation what you expected to see on the ground, but sometimes they don't. And this is really where leading from the front can come in, because you can see you can really get an entire picture for yourself and make better decisions as a result. Because decision making, and as I like to take it, taking a group of persons from one place into the next, is really the core essence of what leadership is, in my opinion.
Yeah, I really like this analogy with the battlefield, and I think, to be honest, this is a bit weird when this guy is running in the front, and then everyone is dead, and then this leader is happy and alive. So I think that in the reality, the leader would be sitting somewhere and strategizing and not actually running in the front of the crowd, but he would be actually planning and leading them from behind. This is so when we're speaking about leading from the front and leading from the back, this is I think that we could use also a different analogy here. I remember this picture. This is quite famous one, so I think that many of our listeners also know this. Manager versus leader. So when a manager is going in the front and he's like, oh, let's go, and shouting on everyone, and then a leader is pushing them from the back and helping them to get where they want to get. So why do you think that leading from the front is a better strategy than leading from the back?
Social proof in many ways. It's a concept by a very famous book by Robert Cialdini called Influence, the Power of Persuasion. And in that sense, it talks about the power of social proof, that if we are expecting people to do certain actions or do certain things, these people are more likely to follow somebody that's in a position of authority. And also, if they see someone doing something, they're like, okay, they're doing it. It's not so weird. It's kind of normal. I can do it too. And that's really where the power of leading by example really comes in my opinion. Something that's also quite important, I think, is respect that people have towards their leaders. And if they see, for example, that a leader is facing the same challenges as them, really willing to put themselves through some of the challenges that they themselves are putting through, a lot of respect and a lot of and very solid bond will be built between the leaders, all the leaders, and the people that they are kind of working with and leading as well, because actually there's somebody that's just like me. They're willing to go through what I've done. They understand me better. I like that person, and I am willing to go the extra mile for them because of what they've just done. Strategizing and planning and really doing all these things is really important as well. But I mean, there's a saying in military history that no plan survives contact with the enemy, fundamentally. And it's kind of it's kind of maybe a bit too extreme, but there's an element of truth about that. Like in Toastmasters, we can make some very big strategic marketing plans. They're beautiful, they're nice to read, and there's lots of graphics. But ultimately, sometimes the reality on the ground is quite different. And these plans, they're not really achievable, or they may have to be tweaked to fit the reality of the situation on the ground. And that's where now there is a cost to leading from the front, because in that picture of, yes, somebody on the battlefield leading the guys to battle and coming back alive, well, they may not come back alive, unfortunately. And that's the cost of leading from the front. It is costly in terms of time, because it is time that we could be spending at home, planning, strategizing. Instead, we're going to be doing it, maybe doing something that has value, but not necessarily immediate value. Something I kind of I've called long range leadership on my blog. And also there is an emotional cost, because when we go out there, we're exposing ourselves to meeting people that perhaps completely disagree with our leadership philosophy, and they're going to attack us and say, oh yeah, why are you coming here? I don't like what you're doing, and so on. So big emotional cost in addition to the time cost. And it's a juggling act. There are benefits to really going out there, seeing the people. There are costs as well. And this is where aspects of self-leadership and time management can really come in.
Yes, I like your theory, and I can say that I agree 100%, and I think that this could be a really great topic for a debate to discuss, because it is also very important to combine those two styles, because leading from the front all the time, then we would maybe not have time
it's exhausting
for other things. Yeah,
it is exhausting, and ultimately a nice way to look at leadership, in my view, is to kind of be able to look really closely at what's happening and then step back. You look closely and you step back. And when you're always out there on the front, speaking with people and perhaps doing things and involving yourself with things that shouldn't be involving yourselves, you might be losing sight of the bigger picture as well. And moving in, moving out, it is a very fine balance to strike. Some leaders do it really well. Some people don't do it so well. Initially, perhaps I was a little bit too much at the front, and I kind of learned to take a bit more of a step back. It's a fine balance to strike. And like many things in leadership, it's not easy. But as I love to say, leadership is not meant to be easy. Leadership is hard.
Yes. I now think about one of my podcast guests. About a year ago, I was interviewing on my podcast Joe Hart, who is a CEO of Dale Carnegie Training, and he was speaking about his trainer certification. So he was a CEO for a couple of years, and then he decided to go through the trainer certification process. So he actually became a Dale Carnegie trainer. And after this, I remember, because I was on this regional conference for Dale Carnegie company, and he was speaking about this, that he just made this certification, that it was so hard, but he said that now I really understand what are you going through. Now I really understand how challenging it is, that this is not just learn something and pass the test. This is so exhausting, emotionally exhausting, physically exhausting. And me, as I am a certified Dale Carnegie trainer, I felt, such a bond with with him, although I know that he will not be a practicing trainer, that he just went through this process. Maybe once in a while he will be co-training, but he has other responsibilities. But the fact that he went through this certification showed me as a trainer that, wow, I can see that he is my leader. So I think that this is exactly the example of what you're speaking about.
No, it's interesting what you said about feeling a bond, because this is really the power of social proof in action. I mean, earlier on in my career, I was working on nuclear power station, and I did a stint in the operations department, and that department works 24/7. So part of my job was to second the guys that were working on a night shift, sometimes for 12 hours a night. And some of my fellow trainees, they're like, oh, I'm going to take days off and I'm not going to bother doing the night shift because it's not for me. And they ended up not having a great experience in shift as a result, because the sense of respect that the guys that were doing this like year in, year out just wasn't there. And some interesting conversation I had with my colleagues there is like, yeah, some people in management, they never see us, they never done a night shift with us, so they don't know what it's like. And it's a simple thing, but I was like, okay, it was just some interesting mental notes and observation I made. And some of the people that were working with me in the operations department, people that tend to work in these types of industries, they can be quite challenging to deal with, but once they respect you, when there's a bond with you, they'll follow you to the moon. But building that bond is the difficult thing.
Yes, absolutely. So also I'm recommending my listeners, if you're interested in our conversations, to go back to the episode of the podcast with Joe Hart. And I think that it is also very important. He's sharing very important perspective on leadership. And I think that he has a lot of, he was discussing a lot of aspects of leading from the front, but also he's combining both ways. So Florian, you were speaking about some historical aspects of leadership, and I know that you were writing about this on your blog. So can you share something of this with us?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated by history, and I just love looking at historical leadership figures, especially transformational ones that really made an impact on an organization and especially on a people, a civilization, or a country. And a concept that I quite like, which is very niche, but the question I can always ask myself is, what if things could have turned out to be differently? Because in our lives, we make decisions all the times, and we realize sometime years later that we did not make the right decision. And why is it that certain organizations end up failing, that certain countries end up failing and not doing as well as they could, perhaps? And this is where the study of leadership can really come in to kind of see, okay, are there patterns that we can identify looking at history, which explains leadership behaviors, leadership actions, or even strategies that were followed in the past and could be reproduced in the future again? A concept I was exploring on my blog is growing tall versus growing wide. I mean, it comes from video gaming, and to kind of explain it very simply, if an organization grows tall, It focuses on quality, on compound interest, on making it bigger by being taller and by being stronger, by effectively becoming very, very, very efficient at what it does. An organization that decides to grow wide instead, say like it focuses on gathering resourcing, gathering raw strengths, which it can then use to win over others. Both approaches have the same objective, becoming stronger and better over others, but the means are very different. One is all about really quality. One of them is all about more the quantity and more, and not necessarily focusing so much on efficiency. And there are certain leadership behaviors and types that might land themselves better towards one approach over the others. I mean, recently I was exploring Russian history, for example. Russia is a very good example of a country that became very strong by expanding, by gathering more resources, by focusing on quantity, and almost at time in history, swarming people through numbers or letting people come into its vastness, and well, and then invaders would be killed off because they would lose themselves in the vastness. But interestingly, it's a country that that perhaps hasn't had the fate that it could have had. Could have been far more powerful than it is today. Could have been far more efficient than it is today. And some of the leadership behaviors that kind of worked well to make the country quite strong in the first place did not work as successfully to make it stronger still, and perhaps starting to grow tall when after growing wide potentially. One thing that became quite obvious to me in going through Russian history is the importance of really human resources, so to speak. There's a saying that by French philosopher Jean Baudin, il n'y a de richesse que les hommes. La seule richesse est les hommes. The mankind is the only source of wealth. And this is a really interesting concept, because if you look, for example, at a country that may be blessed with huge amounts of natural resources, these countries aren't always the strongest or the most successful one. Often they waste the resources, they don't invest them, and they just end up in a worse position than they were in the first place. But those that really invested on their people, in education, in infrastructure, in quality of life, in really empowering everybody in society, regardless of their origin or disability, in achieving something, ended up becoming a lot stronger. I mean, it's the same in the business world. We see some company, they really invest in staff training, in upskilling their staff, and they become strong and successful when in fact they don't have the latest technology, they don't have the latest gadget, but because the people are strong, the people know what to do, then they end up becoming stronger by default. And that's, I think, is very important, because it forces one to think that you can be the strongest leader you ever want to be, but you're only going to be ultimately as good, if you want to be transformative, that is, as the people you're leading with. The people you're leading with, they end up being a mirror and a reflection of who you are. Are you empowering them? Are you developing them? Are you fostering them? If you are, you will achieve great things. If you don't, maybe not so much. I mean, there's a saying in Sun Tzu as well, and The Art of War by Sun Tzu is one of my favorite books, and it's 5,000 years old, but most of it is still relevant today. And there's a saying there: regard your soldiers as your children, and they will follow you into the deepest valleys. Look upon them as your own beloved sons, and they will follow you even unto death. And that saying, to me, is super powerful, and it really is something that leaders must bear in mind at all times.
Yeah, and I think that saying also says a little bit about bringing your soul to your leadership and to your team, and being more human. From what I can see, that in the professional environment, in the business environment, we are professionals, and we are, wearing all those professional clothes, and we are being super serious, and have certain behaviors, while when we are at home with our families, then we are completely different person. And very often when I'm, for example, working with my clients, when I'm coaching people, what I'm doing is not that I'm teaching them to act or to be like someone, because a lot of communication coaching is actually based on getting this other personality from you and starting to show emotions, starting to be more natural, starting to treat, as you said, like treat your team as your family, and be open with them, be vulnerable with them, and then the relationships, they work in a completely different way.
Now, I mean, there's a nice saying that somebody told me very early on in my Toastmaster journey when I was trying to run before I could walk, and said, Florian, you want to be perfect, you want to be great. I respect that. Remember that people cannot climb on a glass surface, because on a glass surface, there are no imperfections. And that's why having our own little foibles and so on is really what makes us who we are, makes us the leaders that we are. And quite often I might look at historical leadership figures and I wonder, well, they could have been much better had they behaved differently, had they done certain things. But perhaps what ended up making them great is their own imperfections in some respect. Their own imperfection made them who they are, and they ended up achieving a lot as a result.
Yes, when I see that someone is imperfect, then I connect with them much faster, because when someone is showing that they are procrastinating, that they are a bit lazy, that they have a lot of things to do and they don't have time for something, I'm all the time, oh, I have this as well. Oh, this is me. And then I immediately connect with those people. So I think that we really need to let go of this perfectionism and trying to act all, perfect, the same as in our social media, we are, tend to show only professional and all our achievements. But in fact, there are a lot of behind the stage things that we don't show, but and it makes people less connected to us indeed.
Yeah, definitely.
So as we are in the communication topic and we moved a little bit from the leadership to communication. So what do you think about communication strategies, especially in terms of leading international teams? And we both have quite an international background. I know that you're originally French, you live in the UK. I'm originally Russian, living in Poland, and we both had to work with teams that are international and multicultural. So what do you think are the best strategies in working with and communicating with international and multicultural teams?
I think there's definitely a lot of things that can be done in that field. But the most important thing in any leadership communication, in my view, is simplicity. The power of keeping things simple and keeping them on a level that everybody can understand. I mean, I'll be writing about this on my website quite soon, but one of my huge pet peeves in any organizations are acronyms. I mean, recently I received an email from somebody that I might be dealing with in the future, and that person introduced me. I am doing MIC in GIS, and my first instinct was to respond to this person, MIC, mice, all uppercase, GIS, with a question mark for both, because I had absolutely no idea what this person was telling me. And this happens so often in organization nowadays. I'm like, right, let's stop using acronyms, because they create a barrier. They make us kind of sound like we're a little bit of a cult, or kind of an inner, you have to be in a certain inner circle where you know all of these things. and it's just not friendly for people joining in, and as they could mean different things in in different languages. People coming from a different industry say, oh, in my industry it means something else. I mean, when I was working in the nuclear industry, we used acronyms all the time. One of them was SQUEP, which means suitably qualified and experienced. We all spoke that language, and it kind of was easy to understand amongst us. But for outsiders, they're like, SQUEP, what it is. And it took me a couple of months to really kind of understand things and start to be in it, so to speak. So that's one thing. Another thing is with messaging, especially if we communicate by email, on social media, is to really keep it simple. Like maybe using numbers, using keywords, using short, snappy sentence and messages. Let's keep things simple, because sometimes we tend to overcomplicate a vision, we tend to overcomplicate missions. Let's keep it simple, because we don't have a lot of time, and people don't necessarily have a lot of time, and less is always more. I mean, a game I love to play with when I train people is to say, hey, here I've got some pens in my hand, count the number of pens. And well, I would have to stop and think right now, but if I only take 3 pens, you see 3 pens instinctively. And this is kind of an approach that's worth doing in communication. Less is always more. With regards to intercultural and multicultural teams specifically, a behavior that leaders would really do well to have as well is curiosity. Being curious about others people's cultures, about their background, what they come from, finding out the differences, finding out the similarities. It's important because it helps building bridges to people.
Yes, I totally agree with you. And I think that this concept, less is more, is as good in leadership as in communication.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so this can be relevant in many different areas, actually, because very often we want to show off, to pretend that we're someone else, that we're not, but in fact, people expect from us only, clear instructions or motivation. Just a couple of words are enough. So less is more is also my motto in life. So I totally agree with you here. So Florian, thank you very much for our chat. It was really nice talking to you. If our listeners are interested and want to read your blog, want to contact with you, where can they find you?
They can find me on my website, speaktolead.co.uk. My contact details are on the website. There's also a blog which is updated every week to every 2 weeks, and we explore public speaking, communication, and leadership. What I spoke about tall versus wide will be explored in a lot more detail in the coming weeks further on the blog, and always happy to discuss, always happy to exchange. Thank you, Eleanor, for the opportunity. You've been a listener of some of your podcasts, and they are very interesting. And thank you again for the opportunity, and I look forward to speaking with you again very soon on leadership and communication, hopefully in Warsaw, in person, over food.
Yes. Thank you very much, Florian. And I will put all your contact details under this episode so that our listeners can immediately click on the link and connect with you. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Elena.
Thank you for listening to Ideas and Leaders podcast. Did you enjoy this episode? Let me know that you listened by tagging me in your LinkedIn profile and using a hashtag Ideas and Leaders. See you in the next episode.